2 years of marriage, and not once had her husband truly touched her. Not with his hands, not with his heart, not even on their wedding night. Not even a gentle brush unless it was needed to keep up appearances, like actors bound to a long, unscripted role. Clara Bennett had grown used to being a shadow in her own home. Silent dinners, empty mornings, and a lingering quiet that settled like dust between two people who had once spoken vows they barely understood. She was a freelance UX designer, immersed in a world of structure, user flow, and logical simplicity. She knew how to create clarity amid chaos, but no design or blueprint could fix the empty framework of her married life. Ethan Carter, her husband, was the CEO of Carter Systems, a man consumed by work, calm on the surface, and hidden behind walls no one could climb. Their marriage hadn't begun with love but with a promise. Before he died, Clara's father, Thomas Bennett, had entrusted Ethan with her care, just as he'd entrusted him with the future of his company. Ethan agreed, as did Clara, but no one asked if they were willing to fall in love. Now, as morning light spilled over cold glass and marble walls, Clara felt something shift, a quiet ache she could no longer ignore. This wasn't living, it was waiting. Waiting for what, she wasn't sure. Mornings in the villa were always quiet, so quiet that Clara felt she existed outside of time. No footsteps, no voices, just sunlight creeping across the cool glass walls. She made her coffee, opened her laptop, and dove into work, designing an interface for a health app. The icons had to feel approachable, the fonts readable, the layout spacious and airy. Every detail was under her control, shaped by instinct and habit. Yet the cruel irony was this: her life lacked that control. Ethan usually left before dawn and returned well after 8. Some days, the only sign of him was the soft click of the front door, just enough to know he still existed. Occasionally, they attended company galas or charity dinners together. She played her part, the elegant wife, smiling just enough, nodding at the right moments. But behind the silk dresses, heels, and perfect red lipstick lived a woman unraveling under the weight of being unseen. She told herself she could live this way, independent, self-sufficient, untouched by sentiment. But lately, she wasn't so sure. Something inside her had begun to crack, like a fine fracture in flawless glass, and she knew that once it broke, nothing could hold it back. Their second anniversary arrived without a word. Clara wasn't surprised. Ethan was never one for gestures, flowers, gifts, or romantic dinners. Still, that morning, she woke earlier than usual, sitting quietly by the window, watching thin rays of light stretch across the glass. She didn't cry, that part of her had long gone quiet. But deep in her chest, something stirred, faint and persistent, like an old wound flaring with a change in the weather. That morning, she realized she still held hope. Not much, just a flicker, a glance, a moment of acknowledgement, some silent reminder that she still existed in his world. That afternoon, Clara stepped into the bedroom and opened the closet. Her eyes fell on a red silk dress, untouched, its tag still dangling. She'd bought it just after their wedding, thinking, one day he'll see me, really see me. 2 years later, the dress remained unworn. She slipped off her soft t-shirt and put on the dress. The silk grazed her skin like a sigh. She let her hair down, applied a touch of blush, and chose a lipstick he'd once said looked good at a product launch nearly a year ago. She never forgot that brief compliment. She set the table with care, a white linen tablecloth, cedar-scented candles, crystal glasses, and 2 plates of honey ginger glazed roast chicken, Ethan's favorite. None of it was for show. It was a quiet message. I'm still here. I'm still trying. Near 7, she heard the door open. His familiar footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. Ethan appeared at the end of the hallway, still in his suit, briefcase in hand. He stopped when he saw her. Clara didn't speak. She stood by the table, bathed in the warm candlelight, her hand resting lightly on a chair's back. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held 2 years of unspoken words. "Did you make dinner?" Ethan asked, uncertain. "Just a small meal," Clara said softly, "to celebrate our anniversary." He nodded, his gaze tracing her face. "I remembered. I just didn't think you'd—" A faint smile touched her lips, bittersweet, tired. "Neither did I, not until this morning." Ethan sat across from her. Clara noticed the hesitation in his movements, The way he pulled out the chair, set his briefcase aside, adjusted his posture. He seemed like a man entering a room he wasn't sure he belonged in. But he stayed, and for her, that was enough for a start. She poured the wine, its red glow catching the candlelight, reflecting the quiet distance and fragile hope unfolding between them. She spoke first, not softly but with deliberate calm. "I don't remember the last time we ate together." Ethan looked up from his glass, meeting her eyes. "Maybe Christmas, our first year." Clara gave a faint smile. "It was cold that night, but not as cold as us." She hadn't planned to say it, but once she did, she didn't regret it. She'd been silent too long. Ethan didn't flinch or grow defensive as she'd expected. Instead, he looked at her, really looked, not a polite glance or a formal nod across a crowded room, but a steady, quiet gaze that lingered longer than necessary, as if trying to read a language he'd never learned. And Clara felt seen. She wasn't striking in the classic sense, but that night, she knew she looked beautiful in her own way, soft, intentional. The red dress fit perfectly, the candlelight danced in her eyes, but what made her glow was deeper. The feeling of being recognized. "Clara," Ethan said slowly, as if testing each word, "I know I've kept my distance. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to come closer." Her heart tightened. Maybe she'd painted him as indifferent, but that voice, with its clumsy honesty, spoke of a fear she hadn't considered. "I waited for you," she replied. "And maybe you thought I was the one keeping you out." Ethan nodded faintly. "Maybe." Both of us were afraid. The silence that settled wasn't empty this time. It felt like a space cleared of pretense, finally ready for something real. Then he looked at her again longer, and in that gaze was more than recognition, confusion, regret, and something close to admiration. "That dress," he said, his voice lower, "it looks really good on you." Clara didn't laugh or thank him aloud, but something softened in her chest. A small, unpolished compliment, but from that man in that moment, it meant more than anything she'd been given before. And that night, for the first time, Clara didn't feel like she was dining alone. After dinner, Clara began clearing the table in silence. She didn't expect Ethan to follow, but the sound of his footsteps behind her made her pause. "Let me help," he said. His voice wasn't loud or certain, but there was something genuine in it, enough to make her turn. She looked at him for a few seconds before nodding. It was a quiet agreement between two people just beginning to relearn how to exist together. Ethan shed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and stood beside her at the sink. Clara handed him a towel as she washed the dishes. For the first time in what felt like forever, they stood side by side without feeling disconnected. The sound of water and the faint scent of soap formed a calm rhythm, like the start of something slow and human. "You have work tomorrow?" Ethan asked, his tone casual as if this were normal. Clara nodded. "Yeah, a new project for a meditation app. The client wants a minimalist design but still warm, inviting." Ethan smiled softly. "Sounds like you." She glanced at him, surprised, not because the comment was profound, but because he was trying, listening. "And you?" she asked. "How's work?" "The board's been tough," he said. "They say a CEO can't keep the company's image intact with a marriage that feels like a corporate deal." Clara tightened her grip on the glass. "And what do you think it is?" He didn't answer right away. He set the glass on the counter, dried his hands, and turned to her. "I don't know, but tonight you made me question it." Clara didn't respond. Something inside her softened, something she hadn't felt in years. They didn't need to say much more. They moved to the small breakfast bar, sitting close, like friends who hadn't spoken in too long. They talked about small things, work, the coffee shops in Austin they both liked but never visited together. Clara shared a memory of sketching alone in a park, and Ethan recalled a seminar Thomas, her father, had once taken him to. His voice warmed as he spoke of him. "Your father trusted me more than anyone," Ethan said, his gaze distant. "Maybe too much," Clara said, her chest tightening. "He trusted you to protect me, but you never really tried." He looked at her. "I didn't know how, or if I was even allowed. And I," she murmured, "pretended I didn't need you to." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of acceptance, of truth. Clara lifted her gaze and met Ethan's. His eyes were no longer distant. They were kind, vulnerable, filled with something she couldn't name but recognized instantly. Neither moved first, but somehow both leaned in. The kiss came slowly, hesitant, almost unsure, but neither pulled away. Clara felt his breath, his hand brushing her cheek. It wasn't fierce or possessive, just simple, a message. I'm here with you. When they parted, their eyes still locked. Clara knew that for the first time, they were finally in the same moment. The next morning, after Ethan left the house, Clara poured a cup of hot tea and sat by the window, the soft sunlight falling across the table like a gentle blessing for a new beginning. In her mind, Ethan's words from the night before, those seemingly sincere glances, still lingered. Something had changed, she could feel it. But things took a turn when she entered the office, initially looking for an old design document. Her eyes paused on a wooden bookshelf against the wall. In the bottom drawer, almost forgotten, were some of her father's keepsakes. Among them was an object thicker than a normal file. Clara sat and opened the drawer. A dark brown leather folder, carefully tied with string, lay inside. As she untied it and flipped through the pages, a chill ran down her spine. They were printouts of emails between her father, Thomas Bennett, and Ethan, all dated just before the wedding. The first line hit like a blow to the chest. Ethan, if you agree to marry Clara, I'll transfer 35% of the company's shares to you. The board won't oppose it if I back this. She kept turning pages. There was the handwritten contract, complete with the CEO position and Thomas's full approval. And what sank her heart was Ethan's signature, clear, bold, unwavering. The emotions that had begun to bloom burst like a broken dam. Clara saw herself, neither loved nor chosen, but a strategy, a reward for loyalty, an asset tied to power and company shares. She put the papers away, closed the folder, and closed the chapter of her life she thought she understood. The tea on the table had gone cold, as if the warmth of the previous night had never existed. Clara did nothing all afternoon. She sat on the couch, hugging her knees, her eyes open but unfocused. She didn't cry, tears were a privilege, an expression of pain for things that once mattered, and right now, she wasn't sure anything in her marriage had ever been real. It was nearly 6 when she heard the car pull up outside, then the lock turn. Ethan was home. Clara stood and walked to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. She opened the fridge, took out a glass, poured a drink, as if that's what she did every day. Her heart pounded, but outwardly everything was perfectly still. Clara, Ethan's voice called from the hallway. In the kitchen, she replied, her voice steady. He walked in, shed his jacket, and set his briefcase on the counter. Clara didn't look at him. She took a sip of water, her gaze fixed on the glass door. How was your day? He asked, stepping closer. Fine, she said without turning. Ethan watched her for a moment, then leaned to grab a glass from the cabinet and stood beside her. They were less than a meter apart, but an ocean stretched between them. Clara knew he could sense the shift, but she wouldn't let him see it, not in her actions, not in her words, because she wasn't ready to be angry, to hurt, to confront. It was too new, too raw, and she feared that if she spoke, she'd explode. I'm a little tired, she said, setting the glass on the counter. I think I'll head to bed early. Clara, he interrupted, meeting her eyes for the first time, but her eyes gave nothing away. She walked out of the kitchen, each step heavy as stone, and Ethan, once again, simply stood there, unaware that the woman who just walked away carried a deep, indescribable wound in her heart. Clara didn't sleep. She lay awake all night, staring into the darkness, listening to the subtle creaks of the house. Ethan didn't sleep either. She could sense it. He was downstairs, maybe in his office, maybe just sitting in the dark like her. The space between them was no longer silence. It was undeniable, chilling truth. Just before dawn, Clara sat up and began packing. A few changes of clothes, her laptop, her sketchbook, nothing more than essentials. She didn't cry, didn't hesitate. This wasn't the act of someone angry. It was the quiet resolve of someone who'd reached her limit and needed air to breathe. On the coffee table in the living room, she left a small handwritten note. I need time. Please don't look for me. Not because she hated him, she never had. But staying meant continuing the pretense, pretending a kiss could erase a contract. When Clara stepped out the front door, the morning breeze gently lifted her hair. The city hadn't fully woken yet. Everything was still, and that stillness was what she needed, not to escape, but to understand what she truly wanted. She rented a small apartment on the city's outskirts, nothing fancy, nothing spacious, but private. It gave her space to think, to breathe, without his gaze or memories pressing in. That first morning, Clara didn't open her laptop. She sat by the window, made coffee, and for the first time in months opened her sketchbook. Her pencil trembled at first, unsure, but slowly, lines began to flow, shaky but real. Ideas returned, timid at first, then stronger, steadier. Somewhere in her mind, she knew Ethan was struggling. He'd find her note, sit in silence, want to come after her. But Clara had loved him once through the silence. Now she had to learn to love herself with clarity. That afternoon, her phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "I don't know where to start, but I'll wait." Clara stared at the screen for a long time. She didn't reply, not out of bitterness, but because she knew sometimes loving means letting the other person be alone, face their truth, grow. She didn't know where this would lead or if she'd return, but that day, she left. Not because she was pushed away, but because it was time to find what had been lost for too long. Herself. Clara didn't leave the moment she read the papers, though every fiber of her being screamed to flee, to escape the house, to run from the man who'd let her live in a marriage built on silence and lies. Instead, she stayed. She sat motionless in the living room as the afternoon light cast long rays across the hardwood floor. The house was silent, and for the first time, she felt truly alone in her own life. She'd endured the distance for 2 years, the silence, the way he looked through her, not at her. But never, not once, had she imagined it had all been orchestrated as a transaction. She couldn't recall how many times she'd reread those emails, that contract. Each word echoed in her chest like thunder. There were moments she thought she'd collapse, but instead, she walked to the kitchen, made tea, and sat again. Because she didn't want to run, not this time. She'd been quiet too long, waiting, holding on, hoping someone would meet her halfway. But now she knew. If she didn't speak, if she didn't confront this head-on, every attempt at love, every broken hope would mean nothing. She sent Ethan a brief message. "Meet me at the lake tomorrow, 5 p.m." She offered no explanation. It was an invitation or a test, and Ethan had every right to decide whether to show. When he arrived, Clara was already seated on a stone bench by the water, her hands wrapped around a steaming coffee mug. He approached slowly, as if afraid to disturb the stillness she carried. "Thanks for meeting me," he said quietly. Clara didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the calm lake. "I'm not here to apologize, I just want to know what you were thinking." "When?" Ethan asked, though he already knew. "When you signed the agreement with my father." She turned to him then, her eyes no longer soft but cold and clear, filled with the pain of knowing. Ethan sat beside her, leaving a space. "I thought it was an opportunity for both of us." "For both of us," she repeated, a bitter laugh escaping. "You got control of the company, what did I get? A loveless marriage, a husband who never saw me as a woman." He said nothing. Clara's voice trembled but didn't stop. "Do you know what it feels like to be reduced to a bargaining chip? To read my father's words and see your signature beneath them, like I was just part of the deal?" Ethan didn't interrupt. "I'm talking now," she said, "and you're listening." The wind moved around them, leaves dancing on the lake's surface. For a moment, silence pressed between them, heavier than any words. Finally, Ethan looked up. "I know I was wrong. Not just for signing that agreement, but for what I did after, or rather, what I didn't do. I never tried to change what that marriage meant." Clara's gaze was sharp. "Exactly. A mistake can be forgiven. But your silence, your emotional distance, that's what broke me." "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that if I got close, you'd see who I really am, a man unworthy of being loved." Clara said nothing for a long moment. When her voice came, it was soft but firm. "I wanted to love you despite how we started. I tried, but I'm tired. I can't keep trying alone." Ethan nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just don't close the door completely. I need to learn to cross it for real on my own, not under your father's terms." She stood, adjusting her scarf over her shoulders. Before walking away, she turned once. "This is the first time you've been honest with me, Ethan, but truth that comes late still feels like a betrayal." She left him alone on the bench by the lake, with only the wind and his own silence for company. Clara didn't see Ethan after that lakeside conversation. No messages, no calls. But that didn't mean she'd turned her back on him entirely. Instead, she watched from a distance, quietly. She'd heard whispers from old friends in the media about the board questioning Ethan's marital image affecting the company's stock. Some financial papers hinted at it, noting the noticeable absence of the CEO's wife. Clara didn't care about the media, but she did care about Ethan. She left her rented apartment and took a cab to the company headquarters, where she'd attend the biggest product launch event alongside Ethan, with a practiced smile and no lingering glances. This time would be different. Ethan didn't know she was coming, but Clara had decided that if they were to face this, they'd do it together. No more hiding, no more silence. The conference room on the 21st floor was lit earlier than usual. Ethan sat at the head of the table, hands clasped, staring into the distance. He knew why they'd called everyone together, though no one said it outright. Every glance suggested one thing. He'd lost something more important than strategy or image. The board chairman tapped his fingers on the wooden table. "Ethan, there are things we need to address. You know the media doesn't tolerate signs of instability." A senior executive cut in, more bluntly. "Your wife's left home. She hasn't shown up to recent events. That directly impacts the company's position and reputation." Ethan lifted his head. "I understand your concerns, but I assure you, everything is under control." "Then why is Mrs. Carter?" The sound of the door opening cut them off. All eyes turned to the entrance. Clara walked in. She needed no warning, no permission, but her presence stopped the room. Black minimalist dress, beige blazer, hair pulled back, Clara moved as if she belonged, though she no longer carried the Bennett Carter name in the headlines. Ethan stood, surprise clear on his face, but he said nothing. Their eyes met for a second, and in that look was gratitude and something more that couldn't be named. Clara addressed the board, her voice steady. "I apologize for coming unannounced, but I thought when a meeting involves me, I should be here." Silence, then a few nods. "Yes," Clara continued, "Ethan and I have our differences. We've talked about them. But there's no abandonment between us. No one's been left in the dark. We're learning to communicate as real people, and that, I don't think, is grounds to judge anyone's competence in this room." She glanced briefly at Ethan. He stood still as if he couldn't believe she was there for him. "Are you certain you're not separated?" another director asked, unconcealed doubt in his voice. Clara's lips tightened slightly, no smile, but her voice was firm. "We're learning to be together again. And if that's the issue, maybe it's not our marriage that needs review, but how you judge people." Ethan took half a step forward, standing beside her. No hand-holding, no touch, but his presence said it all. They were no longer on opposite sides. "Thank you, Clara," he said, his voice low and sincere. "She didn't have to come, but she did, not to protect me, but to protect herself. And I respect that more than anything I've had here." A pause. Then the chairman nodded, a signal that the matter was closed. The meeting ended. As they left the room, Ethan followed Clara. She didn't turn but stopped just before the elevator. "I came because I didn't want anyone else defining our relationship," she said softly. He nodded. "And I don't want to keep defining it alone." In the empty hallway, they didn't hold hands, but walking together, step by step, unhurried, was a beginning. They made no promises of forever, nor did they hide the cracks that had once broken them. But in Clara's eyes, for the first time, there was a sweetness without reservation. Ethan said nothing, only quietly placed a cup of tea beside the sketch she was drawing. It began again from the smallest things, a look that doesn't turn away, a question that doesn't fear the answer. And this time, they weren't walking toward each other for a past promise, but because they'd finally learned to love in the most honest way possible.